we're going to talk about chapter 13 of Revelation today, and it is the mid-trib. So the Revelation 7 years, the tribulation of the Revelation. And there's A, the beginning or initial trib, I call it, B, the mid-trib, and of course the great finality of the great tribulation, the last 3.5 years. So we're going to look into that, point B. So this is, tribulation is divided into 3.5 and 3.5 years, because it's 7 altogether. And pretty much everybody that I've studied, no matter what their position, realizes that the middle of the tribulation is the points we're talking about here. And it's the main thing most people think about, Hollywood portrays in various medias, which most of them are wrong. They don't even really understand biblically what this is. But Jesus referred to it, and he referred back to Daniel. So what we see is Revelation is the grand central station. Daniel, 2,500 years ago, predicted what would happen, the fact that there would be a final 7 years, and in the middle of that 7 years, the abomination, desolation would occur, which all the Jews understood then, because the Greek Seleucid ruler Antiochus Epiphanes went into the temple and slew a pig. So that became known as the abomination, desolation. So by the time Jesus came along 200 years later, and he pointed back to Daniel, they all knew what he's talking about. People that don't know the history of the Jews today obviously wouldn't know what that is, but if you study, you can see what that meant. And what it meant is only one thing, a single thing, and that is the temple was desecrated by some pagan that would go in there, and obviously I think you know Jews, real Jews don't eat pork. Pigs are anathema. It's when the guy goes in there and slays a pig on the altar, that is like the greatest insult. So they called it an abomination. We might say it was an insult, but so they all knew what that meant, and that was a type of what's going to happen in the future. So when Jesus was asked in Matthew 24 about the future and what would come, he talked about this guy who was going to come and referred back to Daniel. So you see Daniel's prophecy, Jesus referred to it and verified it and substantiated it, and then he in Revelation, I say he because he's the one ultimately gave the revelation, even though there was an angel involved. He then talked about in the Revelation the fact that what it really meant. In other words, in Daniel we get a hint in the timeline, we get that. And in Matthew, a short little space there, a short passage, a pericope in the scripture, we get more information. But you got to realize Jesus never taught prophecy outright in his 3.5 year ministry, except for one night for who knows, could have been half an hour. I don't know how long. It was probably a very short time, because that was not his purpose. He came to offer himself as the Messiah. He didn't come as the prophet to predict the future. But when they asked him that question Tuesday night before the cross, that's when he answered it. But even in his answer, he couldn't tell them everything. He knew everything, but he couldn't tell them. They weren't ready to receive it. But they could understand Daniel, because the Daniel passage he referred to, they heard every year in synagogue. It's not a new thing to them. So he basically was telling them certain things were going to happen. And he said in 24:15 of the Olivet Discourse, they're up on the Mount of Olives, so theologians call it the Olivet Discourse. But in the middle of that, he said, you know, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel. So he's tying Daniel together with what he's saying, and then he's going into the future and talking about the future. So even though he was not real specific on a lot of points, he wasn't trying to give them a Greek mindset of this and this and this and this. He knew that, of course he knew that he was going to give the revelation to John. Remember, he told John, he said, you know, he told Peter, he said, you know, when you're old, you're going to be led away to where you don't want to go. And he was giving him his manner of death. And then Peter says, what about this other guy? What about the young guy you love? But, you know, he's not very much. You got to understand, John probably started out as a teenager. He was way younger than the rest of them, so he didn't get any respect. You know, they didn't think he was worth much. And so, but he was the one that Christ loved. And then Jesus said, well, here's what's going to happen to Peter. And then he told John, he said, he's talking to Peter, he said, if I want John to live until I come, what's that to you? Basically, he was kind of blowing him off. He was not going to tell him what the truth was, what was really going to happen. He always spoke the truth. I mean, he couldn't tell him the real truth of what was going to go on yet. So John indeed did live until he was a very old man, and he got to see the second coming of Christ. I don't believe that. Well, you got to understand what the revelation is. The revelation was John being taken into like a VR, a virtual reality, however God did it. He saw it all. He was there. It wasn't just a dream. God took him and showed him the end of time. He showed him everything. And that's what we have when we read the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, you're not just seeing some old crazy visions from an old Jew guy on the island of Patmos. We're talking about the last living disciple, foretold that he would be alive and that he would receive the last coming or the final coming of Christ, the second coming. So that's what we're seeing. And in the middle of that book, in chapter 13, there's 22 chapters, what we have is a portrait of exactly what's going to happen in the middle, point B, the middle of the tribulation. So this guy is going to go into the temple, and then it begs the question, where did the temple come from? Okay, the first temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar in 586, and then we have the second temple destroyed by Titus and the Roman legions, 70 AD, and now there's no temple. You probably know that, at least if you looked into that type of thing. The Jews are trying to rebuild it, want to rebuild it, but there's no temple now. So the fact that the Antichrist is going to go into the temple and declare himself God implies what? There has to be a third temple. So pretty much all of the Bible scholars, unless they're super liberals, realize that this is not a flowery language. This is not just an esoteric image. This is talking about a real temple. And so when he goes in there in the middle of the tribulation, and I think it's going to happen very quickly, you got to understand, even today, CNN, Fox, whoever's covering, they're going to cover everything. When this guy who's the world leader, the fair-haired boy of the world, goes into the temple, they're all covering. They don't know he's going to say, I'm God. So in an instant, I say the 3 hours in the beginning of 3 hours that will change the world. This is the second hour that will change the world. The first hour is World War III, Ezekiel 38. The second hour that will change the world is when he goes into the temple. And I use that hour like, a time. So he's going to go into the temple and say, I am God. And at that point, there's going to be only two camps in the world. Heil, that's one camp, and the other camp is pack, baby, we're hitting the road. And they're going to be heading for the hills, like Jesus said in Matthew 24. Okay, we'll talk about 666 here in a minute. Just so we can see it in context, remember the first four judgments of the seals were the four horsemen. That happens in the initial point A. And point B is when we have the Great Tribulation. And the seals and the trumpets, I believe, are parallel. And in this, given that is the case, if you think differently, that's fine. But if given that would be the case, then this makes sense, because in the middle, the fifth seal is in the middle, point B, the altar of souls. It talks about all the souls who are killed. You got to understand, the very first 3.5 years, this guy is not Antichrist as we think of him. He's just a great guy, a great world leader. He's I don't know what to relate him to, but because there really has not been anybody like that on the stage. But this guy is going to have everybody in the world think he's the best thing since sliced bread. Everybody in the world, especially Jews. The main point is the tribulations for the Jews. The Jews have to look at him and say, this is the Messiah. Jesus said, you guys, when he was here on earth, said, you Jews, you don't receive me, but another is going to come like me, and you will receive him. Well, to be like Jesus, what would that mean? I believe he's going to be about the same age, but at the very least, he has to be a Jew. So if an Arab comes along and says, okay, I'm the Messiah, an Arab is not like a Jew. He's got to be a Jew. I mean, I can go on and prove that. It's so obvious. Of late, because of what some Muslims have done, people have extrapolated that, because their heads are getting chopped off. It's a Muslim. Of course, they forget that the greatest head chopper in history that I studied in school was the guillotine in Europe. It's a European thing. So I don't know for sure what it is. I know if I was designing it, I would make a computerized laser to do the job, because it cauterizes and chops the head all at once. It's less messy and easy cleanup. But that's just my technological background. But so, however it's happening, you can extrapolate, see what you think, read into it. But the thing is that it's clear that Jesus said, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel, he's looking back to Daniel. So now let's go back and read Daniel. Then he shall confirm a covenant for many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week, point B, remember the week is Shavuot in Hebrew, which means a period of 7, in this case 7 years prophetically. Then it's going to be an end of the sacrifice and offerings. Well, if you just think logically, there has to be sacrifice and offerings before they can be ended, right? So where are they occurring? Where's the only place the Jews can sacrifice and offer sacrifices? The temple. Has to be a temple. So Jesus and Daniel are both saying the same thing. Jesus is confirming this. And then he talks about on the wing of the abominations. Again, all the Jews understood. They didn't necessarily understand, I should say this, in Daniel's time they did not understand, and he did not understand. You see in book 12 at the end it says Daniel sealed these things up because at the end the wise will understand. Daniel did not understand these things, but they were prophetic, and so people that come later would understand. Jesus, of course, understood, and so this abomination is going to occur, and I make reference down here at the bottom to the Greek Seleucid ruler who was over Syria and Israel at the time, 200 years before Christ, where he would go in and desecrate the temple. Just without getting too far into it, that's where we get the book of Maccabees from. The Maccabee brothers were the ones that led the rebellion that took over the temple again and cleansed it, and that's why when you hear on TV the Jews are celebrating Hanukkah and you have no idea what Hanukkah is, unless you listen to a little song by that Jewish comedian. Basically, Hanukkah is a celebration of the fact that for 8 days the lights on the menorah in the temple kept burning, and that's what it's all about. So at the time of Jesus, he understood that. And by the way, Hanukkah is the only one of the non-7 feast festivals that the Jews celebrated at the time of Jesus. All 7 of the original ones, Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, Pentecost, Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, Feast of Tabernacles, all of those had been celebrated and are in the Leviticus and other books. But Hanukkah was celebrated after the Maccabees restored the temple. And so, interestingly enough, it's called the Festival of Lights, and Jesus observed it, which is I don't really understand all that, except I believe it's a prophetic thing, and I guess I think I do understand it a little bit. I'm not going to say anything right now. But the thing is that, so apparently there's an 8th one that was added by Jesus. And it's interesting because 8 is the number of new beginnings, and everything Jesus did was a new beginning. Interesting. Okay, Das Führer. Has anybody heard of Das Führer?
Yeah.
Anybody seen any movies about the Nazis and the Jews and everything else?
Yeah.
Who's that guy who had a list?
Schindler.
So, I think even though kids aren't trained very much in history, they're getting a lot of history when they watch the movies. A lot of them seem to be authentic. But at any rate, the whole lot, most people don't know that Hitler wanted to set up the Third Reich. And I heard that all my life, Reich. Well, I had no idea what Reich meant. It sounded like rice, but it's going to set up the Third Reich. So, well, I don't know. But anyway, Third Reich. Okay, so what did that mean? That means Reich is a ruling or dominating power and empire. So it actually meant something to him. He was a student of history. The 1,000-year rule will be the pseudo-millennium. Okay, so that is going to be the goal of Antichrist. But the Roman Empire lasted for roughly, in some form, 1,000 years. And then you had the Holy Roman Empire, which lasted roughly 1,000 years. And then the third, to be the third world ruling empire, was to be the Third Reich. So First Reich, Second Reich, Third Reich. Hitler was trying to set up a 1,000-year empire. If you want to Google or look up, you'll see that what I'm saying is accurate. So you don't hear that much in the movies. You'll hear somebody say, yeah, they're of the Third Reich, but you have no idea why or what that means, right? It meant he had Albert Speer, his architect, designing a tremendous big city with temples and everything to him for the 1,000-year rule. So obviously God had other plans, but Hitler wanted the 1,000-year Reich. Okay, so that's the Antichrist is the ultimate one. These were all little prototypes. So the devil can't get things right. The devil is a limited being. He's a created being. He's got to do prototypes just like we do and test it out. So he can't just think of something and right away it's going to happen, because he doesn't know for sure what's going to happen, because he's a limited little being. Did you hear that? Anyway, he's going to get me to know you. And so basically what we have is the book of Revelation talks about in the last 3.5 years, he's going to go into the temple, say, I'm God, and institute what he thinks is a 1,000-year rule. So he's going to try to bring about what the others couldn't do in the fullness. And that's one aspect. So, I forgot to say, this guy is going to come as a political and military ruler. So there's the Antichrist is the guy himself is coming, and he's going to, in effect, be a political and military ruler initially. Okay, which makes sense. After the Third World War, the world is going to be in a total disaster. And as I've said before, that's how Hitler came to power. The devil doesn't have a new playbook. I remember Rahm Emanuel, one of the guys, the hierarchy of Obama's administration, said, it's a famous quote, waste no crisis. Mm-hmm. Well, that's Satan's playbook. And that's what he's going to do. So after the Third World War, or those plagues, however you want, they're going to happen in the beginning. The world is going to be in total chaos, and the world is going to look around just like the Germans did after World War I. They were in total disarray. They were. It would take a wheelbarrow full of the Deutschmark to buy a loaf of bread. They were in total disarray. Their economy was destroyed by the Treaty of Versailles, and so that was retribution on the Germans for starting World War I. But it was pretty much unfair, and it destroyed their economy. And so it was in such a horrible state that the ruling class of Germany, just like we're going to see whoever will be the ruling class of the tribulation, they're going to say, find a guy, we don't care if he's a god or a devil, find him so that we can get this mess cleaned up. That's how Hitler came into power. They voted him into power. He didn't just take over. They voted him into power for the first a little bit over 3.5 years. So all the Bismarck and all the rest of the rulers in Germany basically said, we can't get it together. Let's use this little paper hanger guy. That's what they called him, a paper hanger, because he used to hang paper on walls. But at any rate, they said, let's use this guy. We can use him. We'll control him, and we'll put him into power, and he will clean up the mess. And sure enough, he did. Germany, all the trains ran on time. The economy was going great. He rebuilt everything up from the ground and made it great from nothing. Of course, he did it because he's inspired by the devil. But I'm saying all that to say this is Antichrist's story. Hitler was just a little prototype. So after the Great Destruction, the world's going to look around and say, who can we get? And this wonder kid is going to come out of the closet. And they're going to say, this guy has all the answers. Let's give him the power. But he's still just going to be a political military leader. However, after 3.5 years, a lot like Hitler, then he's going to put down the iron boot. And he's going to say, I'm God, and you have to worship me. But the first 3.5 years, nobody knows that he is Antichrist, at least like Christians, or I should say the saints know it. But the world's not going to know it. But when even the Jews are going to be fooled. That's the main thing. The Jews are to this day looking for Messiah. And when this wonder kid comes along, he's going to do great things for Israel. they're going to say, surely this has to be the Messiah. And they are going to worship him as Messiah. That's before he even says, I'm God. But no Jew will receive any God but God. That's why they crucified Jesus, because they said, this man says he's God, and there's only one God. So as soon as the Antichrist goes into the third temple and sits in the Ark of the Covenant, in the Holy of Holies, and says, I'm God, every Jew that's a real Jew is going to run away screaming. And at that point, everybody knows what he really is, but it's too late. When Hitler finally, had his SS and his brown shirts and his whole thing in place, and then he basically said, I'm in control, I'm it. And nobody could stop him. They even tried to bomb him and kill him, but nobody could stop him because the devil was controlling what he did. But at any rate, I'm just saying there's very close parallels all through here. So when Antichrist comes to power, the first part of the 7 years, he's going to be a religious, not a political military leader. He's not going to be religious at all, I don't believe. Although he put on a show for the Jews. But the rest of the world is looking for a new age Messiah. We're used to thinking about Christianity, Islam, and the Jews, of course, Judaism. But in the rest of the world, which is the majority of the world of religious things, the rest of the world, we have Eastern religions, right? I mean, I studied religion at the University of Miami, and they put me through all the things I had to go through in the courses. We studied a lot. We didn't study any of this stuff because it was all unbelieving nonsense. But that's what they made you go through. So you had to, study, Islam, a little chapter, and then you had Judaism and Christianity. Oh, I was taught by a Japanese rabbi. I'm serious. This guy, we'd always sit in the back because he would get really excited and his spittle would shoot forth. This is a true story. And so I got used to sitting in the back of the room because we knew anybody sitting in the front was going to get a bath. It's true though. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, we studied Eastern religions, a lot of study on Eastern religions. But the thing is, they all have a lot in common, whether it's Hinduism or Buddhism, which came out of Hinduism, or Shinto Buddhism, which is Japanese style with a lot of ancestor worship, or even yin yang, all that stuff. We wrap it together in the West now, we call it New Age. If you wrap all the Eastern religions together, then it's New Age. So if some Hollywood star said, I'm doing New Age, most people don't even know what that is, really. They don't realize that it's all Eastern religions amalgamated into one concept for idiot Westerners. Oh, I shouldn't say idiot. Gullible Westerners. Okay, people who aren't spirit-filled, don't know the Bible, or can fall for anything. That'd be a better definition. So I fell for it. I was totally into it back when. But anyway, so when he goes and he says, worship me, obviously at that point, a lot of the Easterners, I believe, are going to say, yeah, this is the long-awaited Lord Maitreya. And that's the Hindu term, but they each have different terms. They're all looking for a great avatar. Have you heard the word avatar before? That's a Hindu word. We think it's a sci-fi movie, but it's a Hindu word. It means a God coming down into a body and living among us. It's a false Christ. So, there's various ones, not just one, there are various ones. But they're going to think this guy is their avatar that they've been waiting on for so long. He is God. Well, they got 1 million of them, one more doesn't hurt. That's what the Greeks said. That's why they didn't have any problem with the Jews. Hey, one more God. Hey, we got a lot of gods here. So anyway, just to give you an idea that many Christians, the Pew Research, I've seen Barna Research, two very respected research organizations. Basically, they're saying that most Christians, I don't know most, a lot, believe in some way, not all, but they either believe in reincarnation, astrology, psychics, spiritual energy, and various objects, which is spiritism in a theological term. So 4 in 10 believe in psychics and that spiritual energy can be found in physical objects. I mean, you go poll people because they're not being guided in the Word, they're not being taught, they don't understand that these things are all satanic and demonic. Christians, oh, I'm a Christian. Hey, yeah, what'd your astrology thing say today? Oh, I'm a Gemini. Yeah, I'm always double-minded. But anyway, so yeah, it's amazing. If probably in our own congregation, especially new believers, you go out and poll them, you're going to find probably a hit. You're going to find a hit on one of these guys. So as you grow into faith, you obviously learn more. And I was New Age. I got saved, and I got rid of all that stuff. So was my wife. She was heavily into the New Age. You weren't a practicing witch, were you?
I actually was getting to the point of going into white witchcraft when God got me.
Well, there you go.
Pulled me out of that.
See, that's the greatest
rescued
solution.
me.
White and black witchcraft. There's only witchcraft. It's
Right,
condemned
exactly,
by-
but I didn't know
White
that.
witchcraft is a snow job. They get the gullible people.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, to pull you in. Anyway, that's not this course, but it's related because all those people believe in that stuff, they're gonna fall hook, line, and sinker for the Antichrist. Believe me, if they fall for that stuff, they will fall for him, especially when he shows his powers. Antichrist, I think he's a white witch. What do you think? No, I don't know. I think he's a black witch. I don't know. Anyway, so here we go. So this guy is going to be coming. He's going to mimic, I believe, the first coming of Christ. In Isaiah 14:14, Satan is saying, I will be like, or I will mimic God. So he can't create anything. He only sees what God's doing and tries to emulate it.